We must find ways of doing more for MSMEs, says Vice President Osibajo. Central Bank of Nigeria is telling us the Naira recovery against dollar will begin February 2021. AMCON says banks loan defaulters almost wrecked Nigerian economy. And of course, we're counting down to the official takeoff of the AFCFTA. But the program today will be reviewing some economic happenings in the year 2020. My name is Leah Katung Babatunde, and Business Express is reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. The Assets Management Corporation of Nigeria, AMCON, says loan defaulters of deposit money banks who are on its books almost crashed the Nigerian economy if not for its intervention. Head Corporate Communications of AMCON, Jude Nwazo, who disclosed this in a statement, noted that the corporation's intervention in the country's aviation sector was what made Nigeria to have a semblance of an aviation industry. He added that the agency has been intervening in diverse sectors of the economy by buying off the bad debts of businesses at the verge of collapse, as oftentimes the corporation had taken over some of these ventures. The dollar languished near a 2.5-year low on Tuesday, with demand for safe havens flagging as U.S. lawmakers pushed forward with a COVID-19 relief package. How much is the Naira exchanging for the currencies this morning? Now, a lot happened in the year 2020, of course, and as the year wraps, we are dedicating this edition and subsequent ones in December 2020 to reviewing topics that shaped the year for us on Business Express. The clock, by the way, is ticking towards the commencement of the continent's single market. Now, in the course of the year, we had divergent views on how Nigeria can benefit maximally from the AFCFTA, and of course, in the words of Paul Alaji of SDM Professionals, the continent of free trade promises to turn tables for Nigeria and launch the continent into a mega trading hub. Let's take a listen. Clock is ticking. Is Nigeria ready?
Well, when we ask the question if we are ready, it has to do with how prepared are we to trade with the rest of African continent, the remaining countries in African continent. And what matters the most is what we are bringing to the table. And when you look at Africa as a continent, is primarily dominated. So any country who can convert natural resources to finished goods will be the king, will be the economic leader of Africa. When you look at what China is doing in Asia, Nigeria is that country, the go-to country for the rest of Asia. And you could see that right now, India seems to be doing the same thing, replicating it. America has done that for North America. So is Nigeria ready? There are basic issues. There are things which are the foundation, which I think we might be doing some of them, but the real issue, we have not done them significantly. And what is that foundation? The government seems to have paid attention to agriculture and see agriculture, which will now serve as input for our manufacturing sector. That you might want to say, yes, government is paying attention to that, particularly in the issue of rice and consumables and the rest of that. Now, when Africa starts Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, it will be a bit concerned when our artisans are not yet organized and say they are not organized for the new challenge ahead. In Lagos and some part of Abuja, you see that even those who help us with tiling our floors would prefer they come from neighboring West African country because we say they are near perfection. That does not mean our teaming youth cannot do this job. So government, who under different program that government is running, may need to now inculcate or add to what they are doing in terms of vocational training for young people we have in Kano, in Lagos, and we saw the devastation after the NSAS protest with hijack and looting and in some other places. I strongly believe that even though the time is no more there for us, the clock is ticking, we still have major challenges, which of course we all know, power related, education related, and so on and so forth. But this seems to be everywhere in Africa. Most African countries are visited, seems to be there. But Nigeria stands on a big chance to quickly, as a matter of a year or 2 years, start providing solutions to some of these problems.
We've seen some efforts here and there. Let's say, for instance, in mining. Are we doing enough?
Well, in mining, I think we still have a long way to go. I've seen effort too of what has been happening in mining, but have we started to do that in commercial quantity? I would say no. It's still pockets of solutions. And I have advocated time and again that we need to find a coordination center beyond what National Economic Council is doing, because most of the people in National Economic Council are busy with their respective states. So, but we need private sector driven or individuals whose job purely will be to help us coordinate activities. What is happening in mining, what is happening in manufacturing, and so on and so forth. What is lacking in mining right now, perhaps, is how do we commercialize? How do we produce in large quantity? How do we adopt scale economies or economies of scale to improve what we do so that the rest of Africa can depend on us? And that is how our foreign reserve can be better. That's how our local currency can improve. And that's how we can improve it. But as we speak, yes, there are efforts, but when you look at the impact it's making on the population, it's not significant enough. It does not mean we are not doing at all, but it's not sufficient enough to drive us out of the place we all want to see. The president made the vision very clear to all of us: 100 million people out of poverty line. 100 million people out of poverty line. That means that's in 10 years. He put a timeline to. That means 10 million people in a year. And we have most of the solution we have on the table. African Continental Free Trade Area gives us another big opportunity. 1.2 million people. Nigeria is 0.2 million people. 1.2 million people. Additional 1 billion people in terms of market. What we should sell to them is locally made product.
Do you see these vaccine news being a booster for achieving the FCFTA target?
I completely, I see, that's the way I see it. Even though it's 90%, I know medicine is not the same with economics. Economics will tell you we can get 95% and above, but medicine, if it's not 99.999%. But you see, in a situation where the world is on zero, anybody that scores 90% is certainly an hero. And I think that we should maintain that until we have something better. Medicine will improve over time. That is why you saw what Nigeria Stock Exchange is saying. You saw different stock exchanges around the world seems to have improved, and that is a signal of acceptance. That is a signal of hope that the world is ready for another order, and perhaps the world may overcome COVID in coming period. We are not saying that we are in a state of perfection. The state was in a state of commotion. I just gave you instances of what is happening across African continent. And it's not just Africa. Germany is not any better right now. So it's not just Africa. Even Europe is badly affected. Countries are on second round of lockdown. So when Pfizer is saying he has found a glimpse of hope the world will expand it for vice versa. And that's the truth. So what I think we should do is, continental free trade area is coming, people are locking borders with vaccines, border may be reopened and say it becomes compulsory to be vaccinated, because chances is 90%, 9 over 10, maybe 9 out of 10 people. So we are still relatively safe. We still put face masks, physical and social distance as we maintain now. All of those things will still be there, but I certainly believe that this is good news coming to the world, and we should all embrace it. And we should also have it as one of the conditions. And I think parliamentarians around the sub-region in Africa, we had it, and we can say we have a better way and a bigger business future, starting with 2021 for the entire continent.
And still remaining with the biggest deal on the continent, the AfCFTA agreement envisages the establishment of a massive trade zone with the potential to generate an estimated $3.2 trillion. The question now is, what does this mean for the oil and gas sector? Olabode Showomi, an energy expert, also shared his view on the program.
So many things have been talked about in terms of the AfCFTA. We've talked about agriculture, we've talked about manufacturing. Not so much has been said about oil and gas. What's the place of oil and gas in the AfCFTA when it comes on board?
I think that's a very interesting perspective, which has not really been given sufficient attention. I think primarily for the energy industry, basically, there need to be key drivers for it within the FTA. In other words, it's going to be a little more than just the activities of the Ministry of Trade. They may need input from the Ministry of Petroleum, related agencies, and the private sector. And the reason being that there is a total dysfunction in terms of how Africa does its trade within the oil and gas sector and the possible benefits. And a simple example is what happens with South Africa in terms of its LNG, and Nigeria also in terms of its LNG. You know, we've talked about Train 7 and the benefits to it.
Yes.
But guess what? Train 7 already has a client, a customer for it when it's completed, and it's in Japan. South Africa, on the other hand, is importing LNG, and guess what? They're importing it from the US. So you have South Africa and some other countries within the African continent that need LNG, that need gas for a number of things like gas to power, gas to industries, and the related works. And they are going outside of Africa to buy it. You don't need intelligence to know that that would be more expensive than it would be if they were buying it from Nigeria. So the issue is that Africa as a whole has certain significant major producers of oil and gas in the world. We have OPEC nations. I mean, we start from Libya to Algeria to Nigeria to Angola to Gabon and all of that.
But do we have enough gas for the continent for consumption, local consumption on the continent? And then talking about Nigeria, do we have enough in Nigeria?
Yes, we do.
In Nigeria or in Africa?
Yes, we do. If we choose to develop our framework, I mean, to develop the structure, the value chain, such that we can feed the whole of Africa and feed ourselves. You know, now certain things need to be understood. We have gas, but none of it, not all of it, is available for local consumption. It's like saying you have an ocean of water surrounding you, but simply because an ocean of water is surrounding you does not mean you have drinking water. That water needs to be processed, desalinated, and all that made to make it available. The same thing with the gas. The gas needs to be developed. The upstream aspect of it needs to be developed. Then it will be moved midstream through the transportation before we can benefit from it downstream. When we talk LNG, that's the liquefaction of gas. You're basically talking about export. That's to external markets. So the issue is that when we talk about pipelines, whether it's the Trans-Nigerian Saharan pipeline or whether it is NLNG, we're talking about export of gas. So if we are going to talk about how we're going to trade with the rest of Africa, we're going to be talking about pipelines that will run across the whole of Africa, possibly the two that have been suggested, the one that goes from Nigeria to Algeria to Europe, or the one that goes from Nigeria to Morocco to Europe. Whichever way you are able to feed those countries that are along that supply, I mean that route, and then Europe as well. that it should be understood that one of the strongholds, both politically and economic, that Russia has all over Europe is the fact that Russia is the main supplier of gas across the 30 plus nations that are in Europe. If Nigerian gas is able to move through the AFTA agreement and all that across that place into Europe, we become
we'll
to
have an extended power, because we already have power.
We have economic power and political power to discuss with nations on Europe, and it's on that basis that a lot of things can be discussed. You can discuss fairer treatment of Nigerians there. You can discuss maybe seats within the UN and get their support. You know, the dynamics changes. It becomes the politics of international relations and all that. But we need to do the needful for us to get to that stage. Even by developing that pipeline, we begin to have stronger influence among African nations, because if we are not able to impact the economic realities of nations, there is limited activities you can do to have political power over them.
Now, coronavirus. In the second quarter of 2020, Nigeria's gross domestic product declined by 6.1%. The drop reflects the negative impact caused by COVID-19 as well as a crash in global oil prices. It's the biggest drop in recent times.
The figures, they are quite noticeable, talking about 6.10%. Did you see that coming?
The NBS saw that coming, at least. IMF saw that coming, World Bank saw that coming, and we all saw that coming with the impact of COVID-19 on 2020 and the way demand and supply channels were shut down. You know, everything started going down slowly. But again, it could have been worse. Thank God for the intervention of the government through palliatives, you know, through CBN intervention to ensure that farmers kept on selling, through the coordination of all the palliatives to ensure that what we use as palliative were sourced from the domestic market. So it could have been worse, okay? But because of the COVID-19, this decline is expected, because not just Nigeria, but also the global economy as a whole.
I'm sure you had an initial forecast, though you said it could have been worse. What was your forecast compared to what we have now?
Oh, okay. I was just speaking based on the do-nothing scenario as contained in the Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan. There's a scenario for do nothing, and there's a scenario for doing something, scenario 2, scenario 3. So if the government did nothing, it could have been worse. But the way you see it as -6, and the way the growth is right now, is just showing how the economy was able to gain from some shock absorbers. That's what I mean by it could have been worse. Let's be happy that it's just the GDP figure growing negatively, but it doesn't translate into real job loss, real poverty incidence, and widening inequality.
Okay, what's your take on the 3-year trend of low but positive growth, looking at the 2016-2017 recession?
Okay, in terms of the 2016 recession, we saw that the Nigerian economy grew out of that negative axis in 2017, in 2018, and was sustained up to 2019. That was because of the timely intervention of the President and administration using its economic blueprint, which is the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. Remember, from 2016, the government monitored budget implementation and all its policies and programs using the strategic implementation plan, but that was just for 1 year for the 2016 budget. And then from 2017, ERGP took off 18, 19, and it gave us all this positive growth. Although we're hoping that by 2020, we'll harness all the gains from the ERGP effort, but COVID-19 struck, and here we are with a new plan, the Economic Sustainability Plan, which this administration again has put in the right direction to help tame things down.
Okay, how would you rate this sectoral performance?
In terms of sector, the drivers for this 2020 second quarter growth was agriculture, of course. Everything that happened during the lockdown period was consumption: food, palliatives, bags, rice, everything. Domestic markets. Let's remember that the rice we used, the corn we used, everything was largely domestically sourced and produced. So agriculture contributed positively in the growth of the second quarter 2020 GDP. Health sector also contributed positively because of the, I'm sure if you break it down, one will find the specific aspect of the health sector that drove that growth. But health sector was part of the driver, agri was part of the driver, financial services was also part of the drivers, because all the lockdown period, they never shut down financial systems entirely. so they were operating, at least they could break even. So, but although we didn't see education didn't help in the matter, but it's also expected because there was lockdown, no school fees payment, and things like that. But but we still appreciate what the government did, because those in the education sector, at least for the public sector, could still keep up with their recurrent expenses because they were still being paid at least. And their contribution helped to drive the consumption in the agricultural sector that helped the agricultural sector to contribute to the growth in GDP.
Okay, these are quarter 2 figures. How do you see these sectors you've mentioned playing out in quarter 3?
In quarter 3, they'll just sustain the tempo, because right now there's still the forecast is the fear that there will be a second wave of COVID-19. So people are still food stockpiling, people are still health expenditure sensitive, people are still, financial services are still on, in fact, financial services will grow more in this third quarter, because with the announcement of opening of the aviation sector and other sectors picking up little by little, education sector also will improve. The negative effect, the size of decline it recorded in the second quarter will not be as compared to in the third quarter. But agriculture will remain a major driver. And again, don't forget, the oil and non-oil component. Let's remember that both of them actually declined, but oil sector declined more than non-oil sector. So this is still part of the present administration through the ARGP and the NEST, the Economic Sustainability Plan, to ensure that the focus is on non-oil and not on oil sector per se.
Now we have less than 72 hours to step into 2021, but coronavirus has left no one untouched. On surviving COVID-19 this morning, Kafilat Ayeni tells of how the lockdown that came with the first wave affected her business. The good news is she's still in business and willing to do more. Let's take a listen.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
When it came in was when we just got our ginger in bulk from the farm, and we needed to go on break to be able to stay. We needed to be at home, but after 2 weeks we couldn't sustain staying at home because the garlic were going bad, the ginger was going bad. They are fresh, and we had to make sure we don't run 100% at loss. We had several losses, I must tell you. We had bags of onions that went to waste, like bags of onions. I mean, a whole full truck of onions went to waste. That's what happened to us during COVID-19. And I tell people it increased the prices of raw material. So the effect on us was, and you can't easily go to the market and tell people you want to increase the price of your product. Generally what Nigerian understood is this thing is 50 naira, nothing should change the price. So if you now tell them because of COVID-19 or because of this the price has increased, people don't want to hear that. Sincerely raising funds is actually the great challenge for any SME. When you want to start and you have brands, several products, your greatest challenge is how you're going to be able to use small money to be able to do so much. But I used to tell people it's not easy. The first stage, when we started by sourcing within ourselves, trying to pull the fund together to be able to start. And as time goes on, we keep using the same money to roll over gradually. In buying equipment, to God be the glory, people will say, we're able to get funds somewhere to be able to add to whatever equipment we had on the ground before. And so far so good, capital-wise, to be able to expand has not been easy, but we've been doing it ourselves, but we still hope to get from government. We wouldn't mind.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Now, the financial markets are open in Nigeria as the holiday is over. For the Nigerian Stock Exchange, stocks are trading flat this morning. Of course, the market is still very fresh, but it's trading above 38,000 this morning, the all-share index. And away from home, stocks in Asia Pacific were higher on Tuesday morning, with trade following overnight gains on Wall Street that sent the major averages to record highs. Bosdi Abel reports.
Stocks in Asia Pacific were mixed in Tuesday trade following overnight gains on Wall Street that sent the major averages to record highs. In Japan, the Nikkei gained 2.66%, trading at levels not seen since August 1990. Mainland Chinese stocks were lower, with the Shanghai Composite down 0.47%, while the Shenzhen Composite dipped 0.338%. Hong Kong Hang Seng Index gained 0.92%. U.S. stock futures were higher early Tuesday morning following a rally that lifted the major averages to fresh record highs. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures traded 170 points higher. S&P 500 and Nasdaq 100 futures also both traded in positive territory. European markets opened slightly higher after Trump signed COVID-19 relief bill into law. Most markets in Africa opened for trade this Tuesday morning after the public holidays, but are yet to post numbers. Boss Day Able, Business.
And of course, this is where we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on Twitter. The handle is NTA News Now, and the hashtag is BizX. Business Express returns Wednesday, 3 p.m. Be safe out there. I'm Leah Katung. Baba Tunde.